Welcome to the Research Like a Pro question and answer series. And today's question is, how should AI involvement in my report be acknowledged? And several questions similar to this have come up in the last few weeks as we've been working on writing our research reports. So here are some of the challenges and questions that arise if we're using AI as we're writing. And anyone who writes now is probably tempted to use AI and try it out. If you haven't tried it out, it's sometimes so helpful when you have that tricky sentence that you know sounds a little odd and you just can't think of the right word to put in there. And you can ask a ChatGPT to give you some ideas for that. So as we're writing reports, I'm sure we've all wanted to use it or tried using it, and I think it's perfectly fine to do that. But sometimes we come up with these ideas and questions of, okay, I used AI to help me write this report. Do I need to disclose that? So when should I disclose that I've used AI to help write my report to the reader, disclosing to the reader? And how should I disclose and cite these AI tools? So the practicalities of, do I put it in a footnote or how do I do that? And then every time I use AI in my writing, do I need to put a footnote that acknowledges it? And then is it okay to use AI to help edit and refine sentences without disclosing that usage? So here are some of these questions. Now let me give you some ideas and some answers. So the easiest answer is how to cite AI. So I'll start there. So citing a ChatGPT conversation is pretty simple. If you've noticed, ChatGPT will give titles to your chats. So in this chat, I had asked ChatGPT to tell me about its tone and style of writing, and it told me that it had a clear and neutral, informative tone. And then after you put the title of that in quotes, and you don't have to put the exact title that they give it in quotes, but you can, or you can just mention the topic of the conversation in the text, and then in the footnote, you can leave that out. Then you can also put the name of the chatbot that you're using, so ChatGPT, and then what version. So if you did this like last year, maybe you would put version 3.5. And when I did this, it was version 4. Now, if I did it again, it would be version 4.0. So it's good to put what version you used. And if you have the ability to select different versions, like in Claude, you'd want to make sure you put that. And then I like to put the name of the user. So when I have discussions with ChatGPT, it knows that I'm a genealogist and that I'm a lecturer and that I'm a writer, because it starts to kind of like recognize you and your account and your profile. And if you ask ChatGPT, what do you know about me? You might be surprised what it has learned from your conversations. So I like to put that because I do think it can somewhat influence the response. Then you can put the date of the conversation and the creator or publisher. This is the publisher, the publication, OpenAI, the name of the company that publishes ChatGPT. And then you can put the share URL if you're planning to share it, which I was. Otherwise, you can just put the basic URL right here without the share there. This is like a link to the specific conversation that I can share with readers. Otherwise, you can just put chat.openai.com. And then you can put the access date if you want to, but you already have the date of the conversation, so this might be redundant. So here's everything you might include, and then some of the elements you can decide on your own if you need them or if it's unnecessary. Here's another example. For this one, I'm citing a summary of a Wikipedia article. So I have two layers, and in the first layer, I have the name of the conversation with ChatGPT, and then in the second layer, which is here, I just have the Wikipedia article cited and showing that I provided the first 4 paragraphs of that article and got the summary that way. Okay, now let's talk about how much do we need to cite our AI usage? And I'll give you some examples. So it does take balance to document our usage of AI and large language models in our writing, because we don't want to exhaust or annoy our readers. And so crediting AI in every other paragraph may exhaust our readers. We don't want to bother them and have them constantly seeing, oh, this sentence was written with AI and that sentence was written with AI. So we do want to be judicious about citing AI in our footnotes. And the times where you would definitely want to cite that you used AI would be like a summary of a long transcription where AI has made that summary and it's a whole paragraph that you're putting in from ChatGPT or Claude, or maybe an explanation of a law or background information about a place. You have a whole chunk of something that was generated by AI and you want to cite that you're using that verbatim from AI. Not only does it show that AI wrote it, but it shows that you didn't write it, which is helpful for readers to see, that you're getting information from somewhere else. Using AI to refine or help write sentences may not require that you cite that with a footnote. That's like, it could be akin to citing that you used spell check. So it's more of a grammar help, a synonym generator, rephrasing things. You wrote the sentence, but then you're getting help with refining that. So instead of putting a footnote every time you do that, you might want to consider mentioning that usage in the very first footnote. So the very first footnote, probably not the first footnote, but the section above the first footnote is a place where you can add notes that don't belong in the narrative, but are helpful to the reader. And you may see that footnote section on the first page of a National Genealogical Society quarterly page, and it will mention any acknowledgements to people who helped and just generally some information about the author. Sometimes it will give their address. This is a good place where you can mention that you've used AI to help refine various sentences, and then you don't have to mention it in every single footnote. In NGSQ articles, this is also where they mention the access date for all of the website URLs so that you don't have to include that in every footnote. So this is just a good place to add notes like that. Another place that you could add that information in a research report is in the limitations section, and I'll show an example of that later, or in the introduction to your research report. You can just say, AI was used to help with writing this report, and you can elaborate on how much it was used, what it was used for, and that kind of thing. And that just lets your reader know to kind of expect that and can reduce any confusion or suspicion or things like that. Okay, here's an example of a report where I've cited ChatGPT's summary of a genetics article called the PedSim article. So you can see I've highlighted here that I introduced the PedSim article and then a summary of the article follows. And then I've indented the quote, which is a summary from ChatGPT. And then I have footnote 15 here. And let me zoom in on this footnote so you can see it up close. But it says text generated by ChatGPT version 4.0, chat initiated by Nicole Dyer, OpenAI, ChatGPT URL, and then the date. And the article provided was, and then I cite that article in the second layer. So that is an example of how I have used and cited AI in a research report and quoted from it. Okay, here's an example from Diana's report that she created with AI and herself. She kind of used AI as an assistant, but she wrote a lot of the transitions. So here you can see that she's citing Claude's summary of an article about Dallas County, Texas, which is a really great use of AI to help you with kind of some background geographical information. And so she introduces it here with this heading, Dallas County, Texas history from 1860 to 1874, and then says, a modern history of Dallas County provides perspective on the era when the Weatherfords moved between Missouri and Dallas County, Texas. And then we have this little header, Summary of Dallas County, which is the title of the article by Lisa Maxwell. And then we have the summary. And then in footnote 15, we see that this summary was generated by Claude 3.5 Sonnet on July 31st, 2024. So the way Diana cited it was by putting that in the second layer. And she cites the article first and then the summary part after that in the second layer. So there's another option for you. And then in this example, I have a research report with a section about the two families of Richard Fane Dyer and how he was a polygamist according to his descendants, and that was relevant to the descendancy in this DNA report. But then I also wanted to show evidence for Richard being the father of Robert Luster. And the Robert Luster was listed not as a son, but as an executor in the Civil War pension application of Richard F. Dyer. And so the executor of his will, he's mentioned several times. And I found that all of this was helpful evidence to show that he was a child of Richard Vane Dyer, even though they had separate surnames, because he had two families, and the second family didn't take the surname Dyer because they weren't legally married, because he was a polygamist in Tennessee. And so what I did is I transcribed the pension file with transcribus or transcribus, I think is how you say it. And then I used AI, Gemini, to summarize all of the instances that Robert Luster has mentioned. And so I put that in a bulleted list here. And then in the footnote, I mentioned that the list was created by Google Gemini Advanced, the date, in a chat with Nicole Dyer, and then Gemini, the date, and then based on unedited automatic transcription by Transcribus of Richard F. Dyer. And then the rest of the footnote is the pension application file of Richard F. Dyer, so that citation. So you can see that a lot of the time it's a layered citation showing the use of an AI chatbot tool to create a list or extract information or summarize information from a document or record that is cited in the other layer. Okay, here's another very similar type of citation where I have a deed summarized in an indented block quote, where we have a summary of this deed created by AI says, and then I quote the summary, and then the footnote there shows that this was a summary generated in Airtable. And I struggled a bit with how to cite this. Let me zoom in, because Airtable AI uses various models like GPT and Claude. So I ended up using the title that they give their long text AI option, which is generate values with AI. Then if you go into the settings of that, you can see which model is going to be used and select a model that you want. So I went into the settings and saw that it was using the GPT-4 model, so I could cite that. And then it also had a setting for what level of randomness. So I saw that the level was set to low, and I cited that. Then I put in that it was in Airtable and the URL of that. So that's where I generated that summary. And then in the second layer, I have the deed citation. So hopefully that gives you some ideas for how to cite AI and how often you would cite AI. As you can see, I only have one AI citation on this page. And although I may have used AI to help with the wording of one of these sentences here, I don't need to cite that because it's kind of like using spell check, grammar check, or a thesaurus. But when AI generates a whole paragraph of text for me, I feel like that usage does require citation, and I do want to cite that so that I know, and my readers know that this was AI generated. In case it contains any kind of hallucinations or errors that I didn't catch, I would definitely want that to be known that this was the work of a machine. In Airtable AI, if you want to see where those settings are for what model was used, you can go to that AI field and go to the settings for that by clicking the drop down arrow and then clicking the settings cog. And then it opens up this model selector and randomness selector. And you can see what it was set to when you had the summary generated. And so that can help you with your citation. So how much is enough AI usage that you need to acknowledge it? Some people have been talking about this in the genealogy community, but these ideas are still developing in our field and are not fully decided on. So it's something that we're all kind of thinking about. But here's a rule of thumb. If AI writes a significant amount of the text, then disclose that. So in those paragraphs where an entire paragraph was generated and I'm quoting that exactly, I will disclose that. But if you write most of the text and AI helps tweak it and refine it, then you probably don't need to disclose the use of that. Otherwise, you might have distracting footnotes every other sentence. So this may alter and change as time goes by in our field, but it's good to consider how you prefer to do things. And remember that if you don't acknowledge the use of AI at all, and then you insert paragraphs here and there that were completely written by AI, your readers may not be fooled. They may notice that change in tone or style. And many will be able to tell that it's an AI generated paragraph. And we don't want to have those abrupt changes, and we want to strive for consistency throughout the work. So it's good to not just insert a paragraph here and there. And if we do, maybe block, indent, quote it, and show that it's kind of a separate author. We do want to be judicious in crediting AI so we don't tire our readers with many tedious acknowledgements and causing them to constantly look at the footnote and see, okay, this sentence was written by AI. If you do use AI to write your entire report, here's an example of what you can do to not tire the readers. Just put it at the very beginning under the limitations section and say, this report was generated by Claude AI. And then maybe if your report was only half written by AI, you can say, many portions of this report were written by AI. And you can describe that further. This example here was a report I wrote for myself and as an example for an AI workshop. So I probably wouldn't write it like this if I were going to be distributing it to my relatives, but just to try it out and see what it would be like, I used AI to generate this entire report, and then I put that notice in the limitations. If you want to read more about these ideas, I have an article on my blog called Disclosing the Use of AI for Writing Assistance in Genealogy. And the article goes over some of the different academic fields that have come out with policy statements on how to acknowledge the use of AI in your writing and kind of what's allowed in their journals and that kind of thing. So it's interesting to see how this is coming along in the fields of history and science and different areas. And hopefully soon in genealogy, we'll have some guidance and some guidelines that we can look to for better rules and things. But for now, we just get to decide what we want to do on our own. And so to finish up, just remember that when you have different audiences, like yourself versus readers in a journal, you may have different ways that you will disclose and acknowledge the use of AI. So for a report to yourself, you can disclose specific summaries and uses and footnotes and the limitations section, whereas in a report to a journal or a case study, you would want to ask the editors if it's okay to use AI. And if it's okay, then you can disclose it in that first page footnote section and any specific summaries in the footnotes. And maybe you can say something like, AI was used to help edit wording in this article. So in conclusion, always remember that we are writing for a reader. If you're writing a report to yourself, maybe it's different, but usually we're writing for a reader, whether it's a peer reviewer, an instructor who's going to be giving you feedback, family members. So consider your reader and think about, has this happened to you where you've been reading an email or a blog post and then as you go along, you start to get the sneaking suspicion that this was generated by AI. How do you feel? So here are some questions to help you when you're writing to think about your reader. How might a reader feel if they think you are the author, but then they find out that it was mostly written by AI? Maybe they'll feel misled or think it's funny. How would a reader feel if they notice that one paragraph doesn't match the rest in style, tone, and voice? Maybe they'll feel distracted. They'll feel that it's a little disjointed. And then how might a reader feel if every other footnote is acknowledging that ChatGPT helped write something in the report? Maybe annoyed, maybe bored. So just consider our reader. We want them to have positive feelings of understanding and feeling that they can enjoy the report and the writing and not be distracted. So hopefully this helps give us some ideas of how we might want to acknowledge and disclose the use of AI in our report writing, and consider the reader and keep them in mind and try to help them to enjoy our work products.